Currently, there are 9 nuclear powers in the world, in total possessing about 13,000 nuclear warheads. While the US and Russia make up 90% of those nukes, and are certainly the countries whose stockpiles receive the most attention, this still leaves thousands of city destroyers in the hands of 7 nations around the globe. The fear that one of these weapons could actually be used has soared in the last few years. Speculation that Russia may use a low-yield nuclear weapon on Ukraine, or that North Korea will finally snap and launch a nuke at one of their many enemies like South Korea, Japan, or the United States. But today, we're going to look instead at the potential for a nuclear disaster in South Asia, in the nation of Pakistan. Now, on this channel, we've already covered the possibility of a war between Pakistan and India that could easily spiral into atomic territory, but the nuclear unease in Pakistan doesn't only involve war with another nation. There is a growing concern that internal instability could lead to a total collapse of Pakistan as a country and allow its nuclear arsenal to fall into the wrong hands in a situation that's often referred to as nuclear Somalia. In fact, the threat is taken so seriously that the United States even has a contingency plan for this exact scenario. Today, we're going to delve into the present situation in Pakistan, look into whether or not it really stands on the edge of catastrophe, and examine the far-reaching consequences that this would have for both the region and for the world. Trying to pinpoint the exact cause of instability in Pakistan is as hopeless as trying to find a specific grain of sand at the beach. There are simply too many options to choose from. Now, with that in mind, we're going to do our best to narrow it down into 3 core issues: economy, politics, and terrorism. But before we even get into this, it's really important to note that while many of these issues have been plaguing Pakistan for decades, the situation was exacerbated by catastrophic natural disasters. Between June and September of 2022, the monsoon season dropped a record-breaking amount of water on the country, pouring down as much as 250% more precipitation than average and putting as much as 1/3 of the entire country under devastating floods. To make matters worse, the floods were preceded by back-to-back record-breaking heat waves in May and June, which led to accelerated glacial melting in the east, further adding to the floods and the landslides. In total, the floods directly affected 33 million people, damaged or destroyed 2 million homes, killed millions of livestock, destroyed nearly 500 bridges, and covered hundreds of thousands of acres of agricultural fields in standing water. The disaster did nothing but aggravate the problems facing Pakistan, first and foremost of which is the economy. Aside from the estimated $30 billion of damage caused by the floods, Pakistan's economy has been struggling for a long time. But it's been getting worse in the last couple of years. While much of the world has been battling increased inflation recently, in Pakistan, inflation is absolutely sky high, around 40% recently, passing Sri Lanka to have the highest in Asia. Soaring food prices, fuel, electricity, and water are leaving many wondering if they'll have enough money for basic necessities. And things are just as bad on the federal level. Over the last 25 years, Pakistan's debt has been growing at an average of 14% every year, while its GDP has only been growing by 3%. And by 2022, Pakistan's national debt was reported to be nearly 63 trillion Pakistani rupees, equivalent to a little more than $220 billion. By mid-2023, this has already grown to $270 billion. At the same time, its economic growth had slowed to its lowest level in recent history. As it currently stands, the Pakistani government is barely scraping by to provide energy for its citizens as it bids for natural gas among the sanction-ridden global fuel market. In January, the country experienced an unprecedented nationwide blackout, plunging its 230 million people into more than 24 hours electricity-free. And according to analysts, these types of blackout could become commonplace if the energy situation isn't handled better. And many industries have already been directly affected. For example, the All Pakistan Textile Mills Association announced in October 2022 that it was closing 1,600 of its factories around the country due to a lack of power subsidies, which left 5 million people unemployed in an instant. Toyota and Honda have both closed their assembly plants, as have many notable materials and textile companies. Pakistan has repeatedly been bailed out by the International Monetary Fund to avoid defaulting on its debt, which would launch the country into an energy catastrophe. But the IMF has been hesitant to help out in the current scenario unless Pakistan agrees to huge internal economic reforms, which just doesn't seem very likely. Now, you might be wondering, well, how did the situation get to this point? And that leads us to the fracturing politics of the nation. Pakistani economist Yusuf Nazar wrote, "During globalization and the liberalization of trade that happened across Asia during the 1990s, Pakistan was busy playing power games between the military and civilian elites. This present crisis was brewing long before the Ukraine war, which was the straw that finally broke the camel's back." And so, fed up with the trajectory the nation was taking and with the government's clear lack of ability to handle it, 2022 saw the ousting of Prime Minister Imran Khan from office in a no-confidence vote, placing much of the blame for the recent fiascos on his time in power. Khan was already somewhat controversial, but after his removal from office, he really filled his role as a polarizing figure. Claiming that his downfall was a US-led conspiracy with the Pakistani military, he began gathering support to have himself reinstalled as PM, holding events and rallies to gain followers. His refusal to back down attracted the attention of some violent groups, leading to the murders of several of his supporters and the arrests of many more, ultimately culminating in an attempted assassination attempt on Khan himself in November of 2022. In 2023, Khan was arrested on corruption charges, leading to huge protests from his fan base that clashed with the police. In the city of Peshawar, rioters set fire to police vehicles and officers, and in several instances the police opened fire on the protesters. The numbers are pretty hard to nail down, as many media outlets report wildly different statistics, but we know at least 20 people have been killed and several hundred injured in the riots. Protesters have also stormed several military installations and offices, earning tense warnings from military officials who have promised severe repercussions if the riots continue. The danger for the country to develop into a large-scale conflict is a terrifying thought, as analysts warn that the current riots could escalate, possibly bringing in supporters of other political parties against Khan supporters. And things seem like they're only going to get worse in the coming months, as more and more people will be thrust under the poverty line thanks to inflation, bringing even more people to protest for various reasons. If push comes to shove, the Pakistani military might step in to bring an end to the chaos with an iron fist. But this would only be a temporary fix. An intervention by the army, as likely as it might sound, actually doesn't address any of the problems that are facing the country. As one expert on Pakistan put it, if you're unable to meet the economic needs of the people and just respond with force, it will only catalyze greater anger. If the Pakistani government makes the wrong move, it's easy to see a near future where the country erupts into widespread anarchy, especially if basic necessities become not only expensive, but unobtainable. And with the government in a precarious position, the door has been left open for another issue to walk into the house, and that issue would be terrorism. Extremists have found new life in the unstable scene in Pakistan, especially the Pakistani Taliban, or PTT, which has made a resurgence in recent months and was responsible for a January suicide bombing in a mosque that killed more than 100 people and injured nearly 200 more. The situation with the PTT is only going to get worse, with the United States having withdrawn from neighboring Afghanistan, allowing the Taliban to return to power there. Also active inside Pakistan is Islamic State, which continues to attack anything related to Western interests. All of this added together, the economic turmoil, political infighting, riots and terror attacks paints a bleak picture for the near future of Pakistan, and many fear that a complete fracturing of Pakistan as a state is possible. And with Pakistan possessing nuclear weapons, many fear that in the event of a total civil war, the deadly weapons may end up in the hands of extremist groups. There are two main threats if this were to happen. The first threat is obvious. A militant group smuggles the nuclear bomb into a place like Mumbai and detonates it in what would be by far the deadliest terror attack in the entirety of history. The other threat is that a group instead sells the bomb at an exorbitant price to a nation like Iran, which not only gives Iran a serious weapon, but also secures huge funding for the terror group that sold the bomb. Pakistan adamantly defends their nuclear security, with one official saying, "Of all the things in the world to worry about, the issue you should worry about the least is the safety of our nuclear program. You must trust us that we have maximum and impenetrable security. No one with ill intent can get near our strategic assets." But what's concerning is that this maximum security is transporting nuclear warheads around the country in unmarked vans on a never-ending fissile road trip. Not only is this supposed to keep their locations hidden from terror groups, but also from the prying eyes of American satellites. Distrust between Pakistan and the US has grown significantly in the past decade, and it's pretty understandable why. US drones have routinely violated Pakistani airspace with no prior warning to strike targets in Pakistani territory, and Pakistan harbored Osama bin Laden right down the street from a military academy for a decade while the world searched for him. With such cracks in the friendship, you can see why they would want to keep their warheads' locations a secret, just in case the next Navy SEAL mission was to steal away Pakistan's nuclear status. And, to be fair, it could actually be safer than keeping them in stationary places. In 2013 alone, Pakistan reported more than 2,000 rogue attacks on nuclear installations, with so many different militant groups at large that it's hard to keep track of who's responsible for what. But apparently, with the vans blending into normal traffic across the vast country, extremist groups have no idea who to target. Regardless, the United States isn't too fond of that whole situation and has already developed a contingency plan to avoid letting the nukes slip away. Reportedly, the Joint Special Operations Command has units in the area standing by at all times, ready to move into the country and secure the valuable assets. This supposedly involves special forces, aircraft, and agents already in the country. But this only works if the US forces can locate the warheads in the first place. For all we know, some top-secret CIA project has them all tracked 24/7. But according to National Security Advisor Jim Jones, quote, "Anyone who tells you that they know where all of Pakistan's nukes are is lying to you." One thing that everyone can agree on is that it would definitely be best to never see this contingency plan played out, and the mystery of Pakistan's nukes is probably best left as is. Regardless, the challenges facing the world's fifth most populous nation are not ones that will simply fade away in a few weeks' time. It's going to take serious reforms and societal changes to adjust Pakistan's course, and it's not clear if the government's up for the task. One of the biggest hurdles the country must face is a reform of its tax system, as currently an abysmal 2% of the population is registered to pay taxes. Tax evasion is the norm, and it's on such a widespread level that a recent report showed that only about 150 of 446 federal lawmakers even bothered to file taxes at all. In 2011, a member of the Pakistani Senate did pay his taxes, but upon closer inspection, it was found that he paid about the equivalent of a single US dollar. Mushadid Saeed was actually offended that this went viral and wrote a letter to Reuters to correct the mistake, saying that it actually paid the equivalent of $6 US. Basically, tax is a little more than a joke, leaving the government out of huge sums of money that could help deal with the nation's many financial issues. That is, of course, only if money could be handled responsibly, which many citizens view as unlikely, and is their main reason for refusing to pay. The political corruption in Pakistan is easily the biggest chain holding the nation back from progressing, and it has to be addressed if the current problems are to be fixed in any reasonable way. If it turns out that the current regime can't weather the storm, we may see a military coup d'etat, which, if successful, would propel Pakistan into a highly uncertain future. With so many lives on the line and so much at stake, it's crucial that the nation finds a way to get back on its feet. After all, a future where Pakistan collapses into a failed state is a horrifying prospect and has the potential to spiral into one of the worst disasters of the 21st century.